Outbound cold calling is a fantastic way to generate sales that you otherwise would miss. I want to share with you 12 cold calling secrets. How do you manufacture trust? How do you make it past the initial sort? How do you get someone on the other end of the phone call to want to talk with you? How do you know if the list that you're calling is even a good list to call? These are all things that you'll find the answers for in this episode of The Business Coach.
Maui Mastermind presents the Business Coach Podcast, answering your questions and providing real actionable insights for building a better, stronger, more profitable business without sacrificing your time, life, or freedom anymore.
Well, welcome to another edition of The Business Coach. I want to say thank you for all the feedback, all the subscribes, really appreciate that. In this session, what I'm going to talk about in this podcast and episode is about cold calling, and so let me set the frame for it. We've got a lot of clients that we work with that run companies in the $1 to $20 million a year range. And many of these companies have been in business for 5, 10, 20, some have been in business for over 50 years. And what's interesting is we see that a lot of them over the past 10 years have shifted more and more of their sales and marketing budget toward their various online marketing. And it's been a successful thing for them to do. Now, when you think about online marketing, though, one thing we've oftentimes lose sight of is how effective some of the traditional ways of generating business are. And so in this episode, I want to dive into various cold calling secrets so that you can use the telephone to actually make a phone call outbound. When I say you, your sales team. And I laugh as I say that because I think about my kids and I don't know if they even talk on their phones. They talk through apps, but actually using the telephone part, I really don't think they do that. It's more of a texting type of thing or through various Discord or some of these other apps that are out there. But the telephone is a tried and true thing. And as more and more people have shifted more and more of their sales energy to online mechanisms or other tactics, old school tactics have come back with a roar. They're much more effective. You see that in increased contact rates. You see that in increased first step of sales. So I want to talk about prospecting and using cold calls. And I'm going to give you my very best. I'm even going to demo a little bit later on here how to actually make a cold call, share with you the script that we've used for some time now with Maui Mastermind, looking for new business coaching clients. And I'll share with you the 6 pieces of the structure of that cold call, the 6 sub-goals, if you will, that any effective cold calling script's going to need to have. Now, cold calling is a really effective way where if you have a sales team, that they can self-generate some of their own leads. You might spend $10, $20, $50,000 a month on generation of leads, and you might fill up 3/4 of your sales team's calendar. But what about the other 25%, which probably even goes a little bit more when you think about cancellations or other things? So cold calling is a really effective way to do that. First of all, when you think about cold calling, recognize that cold calling is about, it's more of a sort or a filter than it is to actually find a sale. The goal of any outbound phone call is not to generate a sale, but it's to generate a lead, a prospect. And what the best way to think about it is I might make 100 outbound dials today or this week, depending on what type of sales force you have. Let's use the week. And out of that, I might reach 15, 20% of the people I get over the course of that week. Let's use 15%. That means out of the 100 calls, I talk to 15 people. And of the 15 people I talk with, I might generate 2, 3, or 4 good leads for me to proceed with. But again, it's a way that a salesperson can take charge of his or her own destiny, where they're no longer dependent upon the business for generating all their sales volume. And it becomes cumulative. The calls you make in week 1 compound into calls in week 2, week 4, week 8. And typically somewhere between week 6 and 8, if you're consistent with the calls, you start to see that it starts to gain traction and catch and starts to work. So cold calling is about really important. It's a sort. And when I approach it that way, I'm not trying to make a sale. And so I lower the psychological bar to do that. Number 2, when I think about this, recognize that when I'm making an outbound phone call, I'm not going to propose marriage when I talk to this person on the phone. I'm going to see if they want to have coffee. I'm going to see if they want to go take a walk together. What that means is I don't go for a sale. They don't know who I am. Instead, I go for some early, easy first step that starts the business relationship. And from there, I can grow it from there. So, for example, you might have as an early step, which is to perhaps get them a bit of a particular information, or invite them to a webinar or to a lunch and learn, or maybe it's to get them, like we do, we get them a copy of one of the books that I've written with our compliments. And then we set a follow-up date 3 or 4 weeks later to circle back and give them some accountability on how they've taken value from that book. So remember, we're there to invite them to coffee, for a walk, not to propose marriage. We don't go for the sale. It's too early with that part. The idea of a cold call, it's really important that we try to engage them quickly. Now recognize that what are the elements of every cold call script? If it's a good script, you're going to have certain elements that are part with that. So it's going to have an opener. And an opener says that whenever somebody talks with you for the very first time, they're going to immediately do a sort just from how you make that call. Are you someone who's a spammer? Are you a salesperson? Are you a real person but doing it in a mass market way? Are you a real person that's irrelevant to what they need to do? Or are you a real person calling them about a relevant thing? We want to have the tone of that call be casual. We don't want to make it more than it needs to be. In addition to that, and this is really important, we need to be a real person who is relevant to them. So the most important thing of any cold call is, what's the group of numbers that I'm calling? We want to increase our results from any kind of outbound calling that we do. The pool of prospects that we call is critically important. Now I'm going to share 4 quick sources for that. One is to use an information source provider, the Dun & Bradstreets of the world, or to use a compiled list from a list broker, or where I might say, okay, if I'm working with my target audience are homeowners in a particular neighborhood for us, for what we do for our roofing company, or if I say that we're a business to business, we work with people in this industry with this number of employees for my IT services company, fine. I can look that information up and get a list of 1,000, 5,000, oftentimes even more people with the name and the phone number and other information. The more information I want, the more expensive those names will be. Those are still going to be fairly inexpensive when you look at it relative to what you actually pay. The real cost for you is the cost of the person who's doing all the dialing. So now that I've got the right list, and we have to play with that, how do I test a list? If I've made several hundred dials to a list, the first kind of hurdle to see if that list is useful is the contact rate. How many people do I call actually pick up or answer the phone that are the right person? Generally speaking, we'd like to bypass a gatekeeper. That's not always possible. I'll even give you a script in just a little bit here about how do you deal with the gatekeeper, an incredibly effective script that converts the gatekeeper so that he or she is a champion recommending or referring you to talk to the decision maker. And I'll talk with you about how to do that. I'll actually give you the script for that, of how we do that. And you can model the same type of thing for your own business. But coming back to that, the more information we want about that, the more expensive that list will be. Contact rate is the first one. Number 2, once I've talked with a significant number of people, 50, 100 people, certainly within the first 100 people I've actually reached, but probably even within the first 50, I can get a sense, is this list worth me pursuing, or should I look for a different one? So before you buy 5,000 names on a list to call through, see if you can't get a test list. Hey, can I start off with 1,000 or 500? I'm going to work through this 500 and see how they are. If I have a good contact rate and I'm getting conversations with the right target audience, I'm going to buy more from you. If I'm not, we'll try a different list to see if it serves their needs. So that's a cold list. But what about the warm list that you have? What about the people who used to do business with you that you haven't talked with for a while, that for whatever reason stopped doing business with you? Can you perhaps work to reactivate them? What about the people who were in your sales pipeline but have not yet bought? What about asking for referrals? So there are other lists that you can. I'm talking about classic cold calling in this particular episode, but let's be clear, I could use other calling lists as well, and these same principles apply. So first, I need to have an opener that makes me feel like a real person to them. Number two, I've got to create what I call an upfront agreement. I've got to find a way that they agree to give me a little bit of their attention for them to decide should we spend more time together. An upfront agreement is an agreement that when this happens, then that happens. And I'll give you an example with the script in just a moment. Third thing we need to do is we need to lay out our value hook. Why is it this person might want to talk with you? What is it that you do that gives the 30-second version, the 20-second version, the 40-second version of what you do to see if that hooks their interest, that what you say is relevant and worth them giving you a couple minutes of their attention. Now notice that hook doesn't come right at the very start. Some people think about cold calling and they rush right in and say, how can I get out my hook, my spiel, before the person hangs up on me? Oh, we're not going to do that. We're going to be a real person. We're going to grab their attention. We're going to see if it's worth a little bit of time for them, a minute or two, to see if it's worth some time to know where we go next. Then if that is there, we give our value hook, and that value hook then for them now says, here's what we do of value. Is it relevant for you? Next, number 4, we're going to do some pre-qualification. Once they say that this is something they're interested in or they want to continue on, now we get to qualify them. We get to ask 3, 4, 5 questions that lets us gauge, are they qualified for what we need? Do they have some motivation, hot buttons that we can press on? And then finally, number 5 is we're going to close on the next step. Now we need to be strategic here. Remember, the next step is coffee, not marriage. It's going to be a simple, low bar threshold for what that next step might be. Maybe it's for them to invite you out to do an on-site inspection and give you your best relevant this. Maybe they're going to come into the showroom for you to be able to show them this. Maybe it's for you to send them certain information with a follow-up appointment thereafter. But it's not going to be that saying, hey, please go ahead and write out that check, or hey, here's the QR code, send me the Venmo with the money. It's not asking for marriage. It's just that first early step of coffee. Now, once you've done that first early step, step number 6 says you've made a promise. Here's how you manufacture trust. I can manufacture trust by I've made a promise. Now I get to deliver and keep that promise. And so let's do an actual script, and then we'll come back to it, because sometimes it's easier to see this when you hear the actual scripting itself. So I'm going to use Maui Mastermind as an example. It's a script I'm fairly familiar with. We wrote it quite some time ago, and our sales team has used it various times. And this script, again, our target audience are business owners who have successful businesses, profitable businesses, typically in the $1 to $20 million a year range. They're owner-led firms, so the owner still is the one running them. And they're either owner-reliant, middle stage level 2, where the owner is the person driving the business forward, it works around them, or they're in that what we call rapidly scaling business, but the owner is still at the heart. So we don't just help business owners grow their company, we help them grow the company independent of the owner. Both of those are aspects that we look for when we're looking for a client. So imagine you were a business owner and we called you up out of the blue and you picked up the phone. And the script's going to sound something like this. So I know the person's name, and that's about it. I don't know anything about their company beyond their name, their phone number, and maybe for the list is a certain niche industry. For us, we have certain things that we look for that tend to be industries that we work well with. We work in 30, 40 different verticals, but let's just pretend. So ring, ring, person picks up the phone. Hi, Paul. Hi, this is David Finkel. I'm looking for some help, but I'm not even sure if we need to have a conversation today. Would it be okay if I just briefly explain what I do, and then you can decide whether we should even continue the conversation? So I'm going to pause there and step out of what I'm saying. As I step out of this, notice what I've just done. I've come across as a person, a real person, not a salesperson. In addition to that, I've just said, look, how about if I just briefly tell you what we do, and then you can say, yeah, we should keep talking, or no, it's not relevant for what we're looking to do. We shouldn't keep talking. That's an example of an upfront agreement. Let me explain what we do, and then you tell me, yes, we should continue, or no, we shouldn't. That's an upfront agreement. The way the phone call sounds is just a person. I don't want to read the script perfectly. I don't want to read, I am looking for some help, but I'm not even sure if we even need to have a conversation today. Too mechanical. I want to rough it up. Yes, I believe on a phone I should be using an actual script, but the script that I use, I can rough it up a bit. Hi, I'm looking for some help, but I'm not even sure if we even need to have a conversation. Notice there's ums and ahs and pauses. Why? Because real people talk like that. So the person says yes. I say, well, great. Paul, I'm with Maui Mastermind Business Coaching, and we're a company that specializes in helping small and mid-sized companies and business owners not just to grow, revenues and margins, but most importantly to mature the business, to be independent of them, the owner. And I spend a lot of my time talking with owners of companies. Typically, when we talk, what they say to me is something like, David, the business works, but only when I'm there to make sure that it works. I'm always scared that if I weren't there to make it work, the business could suffer or even fail. Or they say, hey, David, the business is working, but it's not really where I want it to be, and I'm not sure the best way to get it there. And I would really value an outside trusted perspective or mentor to give me input to do it more intelligently. Or even sometimes, Paul, I hear, hey, David, I feel like the business owns me. I don't own the business. Is any of what I just described relevant for you, Paul? Notice what I've done is I've just put the value proposition out there, and I've asked him, is it relevant? Does this sound interesting? Should we continue on? And if he does say no, then we're good. We've saved time. We'll make that a no. But chances are, if I've called the right person, he's going to say, well, yeah, that actually is interesting. So now I do another upfront agreement. Thanks for letting me know, Paul. Based on that, here's what I would propose. Why don't I ask you a few very basic questions about your business and where it stands and what you're trying to accomplish with it? And then based on your answers, I'll have a sense if you might be someone we can help. And clearly, Paul, we're not somebody who helps all companies. There are certain types of companies we work really well with and others that just aren't a fit or we're not a fit for. And if it feels like your business fits what we're looking for, here's what I would propose for a next step, Paul. I'll actually send you a copy of our CEO David Finkel's latest bestseller, Scale, and I'll make that book our gift. And just to start growing the business relationship. And then we'll set up a short 5-10 minute phone call 2 or 3 weeks after you get the book. So you can tell me, yes, David, your approach to scaling companies fits for what we're looking for, or no, it's not how we want to scale a company. And if it's not how you're looking to scale your business, our approach to growing a company, you tell me, and everything ends there. No harm, no foul. And if it is, in fact, the way we approach growing a company fits for you, it's something that seems like that would be useful for you, then we talk about what next steps we have that we could help you to do that. Does this game plan for us right now here, Paul, does that work for you? Okay, great. Well, let me ask you first, and then I ask my qualifying questions, and then at the end, I give my next step. Notice what the script did and notice what the script doesn't do. The script doesn't do asking for Paul to say, hey, join us today, become part of the Maui community. That's ridiculous. He doesn't know who we are. We've just made an initial phone call. We need to build some value and some trust with that part. The core philosophy that served me so well, it's helped us in the companies that I personally scaled and grown, and it's helped with thousands of other businesses that we've coached, is give value first. Give value first. Now, that value you give might be a white paper that's relevant for their situation that you get to them. It might be having them join you for a 30-minute lunch and learn webinar that's coming up next week. It might be coming into the showroom to test drive X or Y. It might be, and you come up with your own piece with that. But it's not going to be for them to buy right there over the phone. It's that earlier first step. Now, the beautiful part about this is when you've done that and they agree to that, you've now made a promise. I'm going to deliver X to you. I'm going to deliver that white paper to you. I'm going to deliver that free book to you. I'm going to deliver that webinar to you. The way that we create trust with someone who doesn't know us is we make a promise, we keep a promise. We make a promise, we keep a promise. So, if, for example, a white paper, if that's the next step with a phone appointment later on, right after I'm done with that call, Paul, as promised, here's your white paper about 5 ways of securing your IT infrastructure from ransomware. or whatever that might be. And just a reminder, I've set in the appointment for us. We're going to have a 15-minute follow-up conversation we've scheduled already next Thursday at 12 noon Eastern, right? Something as simple as that, where I've made a promise, I fulfill on the promise. And if I'm going to have a follow-up appointment, you better believe that I'm going to, the day before, send a quick text. Say, just a reminder, I'm looking forward to our call tomorrow at noon. I'll call you on your cell phone like we talked about. Or when it comes to the call, I'm going to be on time to the minute. I'm not going to be late. I made a promise, I keep a promise. I made the next promise, I keep a promise. The way people know that we can trust you is that they do what's called inductive reasoning. They take a small sliver of experiences with you. And if you're trustworthy in those small sliver of experiences, they generalize that out and say, oh, you're a person I can trust. If you screw it up in those promises, they're going to come to a different conclusion. It's really important, especially early in the relationship before you build the other value pieces in the relationship, to make a promise and keep the promise. Really, really important. So cold calling is a simple way for you to use to generate business revenue. And again, think about it. This week I make 100 dials. I'm going to reach in those 100 dials 15 people, maybe 20 people, depending on the list. All I'm looking to do probably is to turn those into 2 to 4 serious leads that I can now put into my system, into my pipeline. And if I do that week after week after week, by 6 or 8 weeks later, doing that simple process, now I've got 10, 20 solid leads that I'm working, that now I get to keep replenishing them as I go on week by week by week. 4 more insights or secrets about making cold calls. Number 1, your sales team can't just do them once in a while. They've got to do them consistently. Generally, I tell any of the clients that we coach, have your team do them daily or at least 3 times a week. They need to build up some calluses and muscles to do those calls. They shouldn't just make 5 calls when they have a moment. They should be doing an hour, 2 hours of outbound dialing during each calling sessions or more. Why? Because they need to build some momentum. I even tell people, go for 10 no's as fast as you can, just to get yourself into motion. And then you can work on scaling them up. So the first is, we need to batch those calls in and do it multiple times throughout the week. Next on there, remember, I'm not there to find a buyer. I'm there to sort, to filter, to sift, to find prospective people to put into my pipeline process. That's what I'm doing. And if I lower that bar, when someone says no, it's just like I filter them out. It's okay. Number 3, I make a promise, I keep a promise. It's really important. The follow through and the system you have for that follow through, your CRM, really important for that. And then number 4, and this is something I want to re-emphasize, I've got to be a real person. I can't be an automaton. I can't be a master salesperson. No, I've got to be a real person, and real people aren't perfectly smooth on the phone. We and we struggle sometimes to find the right words. We're a real person with that part. Practicing those types of scripting elements over time, right? To get yourself through the right sort, and to set your initial upfront agreement, and then give them your value proposition, and then to do your qualification and build a little bit of motivation, and then to close on the next step, which is coffee, not marriage, and to manufacture trust by fulfilling on the promises that you've made early on in that business engagement. Those things will put you in great stead, and they really do work. Our clients have used outbound calling to generate hundreds of millions of dollars of business over the past 25 years. The same will be true for you. I hope you enjoy it. I hope this makes a difference for you. And remember, it's a simple thing for your sales team where they can be in control of their own destiny. That's how we sell it to them. This is a way for them to create some extra volume that they control. Not the company from leads that you distribute, but they control. They're the masters of their own destiny. I wish you every success, and thanks for listening to another episode of The Business Coach.